And I'd like to introduce our speakers today. Barbara Charry is an experienced conservation leader with expertise in aquatic and terrestrial habitat connectivity and impacts of roads and development on wildlife and habitat. Her work focuses on the intersection of freshwater and lands and identifying synergies and pragmatic solutions for issues impacting wildlife and people based on science and collaborative partnerships. She started working for TNC in 2016 and led TNC's Missouri floodplains and nature-based solutions team. After the catastrophic 2019 Missouri River floods, Barbara convened a large partnership of agencies who, through radical collaboration, supported and implemented the local community's vision for a large-scale levee setback project that serves as a national model for a nature-based solution for flood resilience. She previously worked for Maine Audubon as a conservation biologist, where she initiated and developed the highly successful Stream Smart program, a statewide professional training program to organize and unify the best strategy for road stream crossings to maintain fish and wildlife habitat while protecting roads and public safety. She was also co-founder of Maine's nationally award-winning Beginning with Habitat Municipal Land Use Conservation Program. She has a BA from Grinnell College, go Iowa, and a master's in environmental science from Antioch, New England grad school. Having grown up on the Missouri River, just a shout out. Rich Cavanaugh is our other speaker. Rich serves as land protection manager in Massachusetts. He comes to TNC after a decade of counseling individuals and nonprofits in land conservation and in the agricultural sector, handling real estate transactions, farm succession planning, business formation, regulatory compliance, among other things, through his own firm based in Petersham, Mass. Prior to that, his practice at Gallagher and Cavanaugh LLP, which he helped to form in Lowell, Mass, centered on civil litigation and counseling corporate clients. Rich received his BA in political science from Boston College and his JD from Boston College Law School. He and his wife, Annie, have been renovating an 18th century farmhouse, which he says will only be completed when he signs the deed over to someone else. In the meantime, he also serves as chair of the Petersham Advisory Finance Committee and on the board of directors at the East Quabbin Land Trust. So welcome both of you, and I will turn it over to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Rob. And it's so wonderful to be here with everyone today. So we're going to talk a little bit. I'm going to start a PowerPoint here in just a second. And we will hold the questions till the end. I think that will work the best in this situation. But let me get that PowerPoint started and we'll get going. Let's see. Here we go. And hopefully, oops, if I hold on a sec. Uh, Hold on just a sec. Okay, that should be
Yep, that looks
good.
good.
All right, great. So really happy to be here and share our the Nature Conservancy's work in Massachusetts. What we're going to talk about today is the Nature Conservancy's global goals for 2030 to address the dual biodiversity and climate crisis, and why we're elevating our freshwater work and how that work touches down in Massachusetts, and then why we're talking about this at a land trust conference. And then we'd love to have a little bit of the time at the end to, have your questions, but also discuss a little bit about your thoughts on opportunities and challenges and needs to increase our collective work and its impacts. I started in this position about a year and a half ago. I've lived and worked throughout New England, a good chunk in Maine, but I've been in Massachusetts for some internships and past lives. And then I realized the other day I've been living in every state except for Rhode Island. So I have to do a little stint in Rhode Island someday. Again, I moved back here from Missouri after working for the Nature Conservancy for about 6 years in Missouri. Rich, is there anything you wanted to share before we get going?
No, just to say thanks, Rob, for the introduction, and to let people know that over the last 10 years, since I made the switch over into the conservation realm, I've had the good fortune to work with a number of people that are on this program and through other land trusts. And I've really enjoyed learning from them. And I'm really excited and eager to enhance what we can accomplish together from my new perch here at TNC.
Great. Okay. So the Nature Conservancy has really narrowed its focus globally to address the dual biodiversity and climate crisis. And we've developed goals for 2030 as where we think we can have the greatest impact. So I'm going to share part of a little video to give you a sense of what these goals are and the focus.
Look at this. It's the year 2030, and it's a beautiful day. For the first time in our lives, climate emissions are beginning to stabilize. And while we're feeling the effects of climate change, nature is helping us be more resilient. More trees are cooling our communities, and restored reefs and wetlands are protecting our coasts from rising seas and storms. Our lands, ocean and freshwater, and the communities that depend on them are returning to health. We just need to get there. Somehow. The gap in front of us is the widest we've ever faced. More than 1 million plant and animal species face extinction. And since 1970, climate emissions have increased by 90%, and they are still increasing. These interconnected crises are accelerating. Delay is not an option. At the Nature Conservancy, we're working with partners, communities, and decision makers across the globe to help bridge the gap during this defining decade. And the best way forward is together. So we've set the biggest, most ambitious goals in our history. These goals and the pathways to achieve them directly support the world's most important environmental commitments like the Paris Climate Agreement and the Global Biodiversity Framework. Grounded in science, these goals represent how the Nature Conservancy can contribute to what the world needs most during these critical years. So, let's explore our goals for 2030 and see how achieving them helps us build a bridge to a better future. We'll reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 3 billion metric tons a year. That's nearly 10% of the total reductions the world needs to avoid the worst effects of climate change. We'll meet this target by unlocking the power of nature to absorb carbon, helping to transform food systems, and supporting the world's transition to clean energy. To reverse the loss of nature, world leaders have agreed to protect 30% of land, ocean, and fresh water. So we'll help by conserving 650 million hectares of diverse habitats such as forests and grasslands. That's an area twice the size of India. And that's just on land. We'll also conserve 4 billion hectares of ocean area, more than 10% of the entire ocean, by working with communities to create protected areas and thriving fisheries. Okay, let's head back to shore. We'll help 100 million people adapt and become more resilient to climate change by conserving and restoring habitats that protect communities from severe floods, wildfires, heat, and drought. And we'll conserve 1 million kilometers of river systems, enough to stretch around the world 25 times, and 30 million hectares of lakes and wetlands. That's like 3 Lake Superiors or 10 Lake Tanganyikas. And finally, we will do this by supporting the leadership, authority, and knowledge of 45 million people whose well-being and livelihoods are directly tied to nature's health, like farmers growing sustainable cacao trees in Brazil, and indigenous peoples managing grasslands with traditional fire in Australia. Now, the beauty of these goals is how the pathways to achieve them intersect and work together to create results that will endure far beyond 2030. One example is...
All right, so there's a little bit more, and you're welcome to find it on our website, but that gives you kind of a background. And so, the freshwater goals that we were just in that film, we committed to these 3 different goals. as well as our land goal. And again, you can go to our website and learn a little bit more about them. But in Massachusetts, we've been developing a conservation strategy around 3 themes: ocean and coasts, tackling climate change, both the mitigation side and adaptation to climate, and rivers and lands. And so today we're focusing primarily on our rivers and lands theme. And what we aim to achieve, or our North Star, is to protect and improve the health and resilience of freshwater and land in Massachusetts. So by 2030 in Massachusetts, we've committed through our work and through supporting the work of others to protect and restore 150,000 acres of land in Massachusetts in our watersheds. And that's really supporting the state's clean energy and climate plan. And protect and restore and reconnect Massachusetts, about 25,000 acres of floodplains and land along our waterways, our riparian areas. And protect, restore, and reconnect 1,000 miles of our rivers in Massachusetts. And we're going to talk a little later about more specifics about that work. But first, I wanted to share why the Nature Conservancy is elevating its freshwater work across the globe, and what we're calling the freshwater imperative. And so one more little interactive video. The Nature Conservancy is the largest freshwater organization in the world. And this video helps us sort of describe and inspire the work that we do and need to do. Jump ahead. So building on that fun video, we know that rivers and lands and wetlands cover less than 1% of the planet's surface, but they play a disproportionately vital role in sustaining the environmental and economic systems on which we depend. And conserving freshwater ecosystems is an imperative that connects us all. Rivers, lakes, and wetlands sustain communities, drive our economies, underpin our food systems, shape our landscapes and weather patterns, and nourish the intricate web of biodiversity. They're essential for all life on Earth. The rivers, lakes, and wetlands and underground aquifers supply our water for drinking, growing crops, manufacturing, energy, transport. They feed and connect our communities. We need our free-flowing rivers to regulate water temperatures, sediment regimes, and fish migrations. Wetlands protect against flooding and provide homes to migratory birds and wildlife. Groundwater, that's the water that's held beneath or flow beneath the land surface in rocks, soil, or in organic matter, stabilizes our river flows during dry months and stores water for future needs. And our watersheds and catchments, the higher land around river systems, capture that rain water and then move that to larger systems further downstream, either as groundwater or surface flow. And healthy watersheds reduce soil erosion and flooding and can improve the quality and quantity of water downstream. Only a third of the world's rivers remain free-flowing, and due to Massachusetts' colonial past, we are ground zero for the number of and density of obsolete dams. And we also have learned that freshwater habitats have suffered a significant loss in biodiversity, 83%, much more than all other realms, including terrestrial and marine realms. So it really requires our focus. And freshwater systems are already feeling the effects of accelerating climate change. They will suffer disproportionately and lose more biodiversity than any other system. The good news is degraded freshwater ecosystems can recover quickly, and we can protect those systems that are healthy now for future generations. So the areas that we'll be focusing on are protecting and restoring those systems, freshwater systems. We're implementing long-term protection efforts to conserve freshwater systems above and below ground, ensuring they're healthy and intact. We're modifying or removing obsolete dams and restoring natural flows, reconnecting river systems to their floodplains. We're driving investment in solutions that are rooted in nature upstream to protect biodiversity and solve water security issues downstream. We're applying the latest science and traditional knowledge to restore biodiversity and help the millions of people for whom freshwater fisheries are food or income. And we're co-designing projects that deliver benefits equitably to people and avoid disproportionate harm to those with less power and privilege. So those are the things we're working on around the globe and striving for. But another question is, why is freshwater so important for wildlife? Well, more animals live where land and water meet than in any other habitat type in the Northeast. Hundreds of species depend on this habitat for survival. Our waterways and the land alongside them provide habitat for daily life to find food and water, dispersal to new territories, and to move to find suitable habitat as those habitat change due to climate impacts. Animals move in and along waterways. For example, fish like this brook trout move in streams and rivers. They often can go as much as 12 miles if they're able. And in order to breathe in summer months, they have to find those cooler waters as the temperatures continue to increase in our summer months. Turtles like this wood turtle move up and down rivers and streams, as well as up into the uplands. So the turtles, they nest in dry, sandy uplands, typically within 900 feet of our slow-moving streams. Wood ducks, they nest in tree cavities within 600 feet of waterways. Mink and otter move along our rivers and streams, and otter home ranges can be as much as 50 linear miles. Bobcat and fox spend more time of their hunting along those waterways than in any other area. They're taking advantage of the high concentrations of prey, and you also use them for travel corridors. So in addition to protecting all these valuable wildlife habitat, we get multiple benefits such as clean water, flood and drought resistance, and recreational opportunities. But as in Massachusetts, we're focusing on this intersection for the reasons we've talked about, And there's another really important reason, because our research is showing that freshwater conservation is falling significantly behind. We're making good gains on the terrestrial side, but our freshwater systems are really not protected in the way that will make them resilient into the future. Our Center for Resilient Conservation Science released a report on the conservation status of natural habitats in the Northeast. This is in association with the Northeast Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies. And a few of their findings are that only about 8% of our headwaters of land where we have streams and rivers that have some local protection are actually protected. Big rivers have the most habitat conversion, and most of that conservation risk is in their area along the waters. We know when impervious surface exceeds 10% of a watershed, aquatic systems become seriously impacted. And there's declines even at lower levels than that. So given that once areas are developed into impervious surface, it's very hard to return them to a natural state. It's clear that we should be making extra effort to minimize that additional loss of land to prevent further degradation of our stream and river systems. And in the Northeast, 82% of our rivers and streams are altered by dams and impervious surface. We have 14,000 dams, fragment stream networks in the region, with the highest concentration, as you can see kind of on this bullseye map here in Massachusetts. In the Northeast, there are 10.5 dams for every 100 miles. So this has caused a 91% decrease in the historic range for diadromous fish and impacted the stream health and abundance of many other species. We're making progress in this area, but we have a long way to go. Freshwater conservation is complex. There are many aspects that you have to work on in order to have healthy systems. But we're taking a watershed approach, and in order to sharpen our focus, we're working on 3 main aspects, plus integrating connectivity for all wildlife. We're working to protect the headwaters, protect and restore land alongside rivers and streams, reconnect rivers, floodplains and streams, floodplains to the river and streams by removing dams and replacing undersized road stream crossings. So what's our approach? Well, right now there is it's really an incredible time to be working for conservation. There is an unprecedented amount of federal funding available through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act for nature and nature-based solutions, for flood risk reduction, for clean water, for animal movement, and land protection. So now is really the time to tap those funds and get them on the ground for conservation. We're doing that work by working with and supporting the work of our partners and communities. And we will focus on projects that provide as many co-benefits for nature and people as possible. Those are our approaches. We're looking forward to continuing to work with many of you. And I'm going to pass the baton over to Rich and let him talk a little more specifically about where we're doing some work and some of the types of projects we're involved in, and a little bit of a focus on our how this all relates to land protection.
Okay, great. Thanks, Barbara. Several years ago, the Nature Conservancy did one of the things that it does best. It analyzed places around the world that were critical for biodiversity and that were critical for sequestering carbon. It identified 4 global focus areas. One of them is right here in North America, with part of that right here in our backyard. As TNC studied the data, the Appalachians popped off the map as a globally significant landscape. The Alps, not to be confused with the Alps, and I'm new to TNC, so I'm just starting to learn this lingo, but the Alps contain the largest remaining tracts of temperature broadleaf mixed forest in the world. Hundreds of natural communities are embedded within these forests, ranging from vast wetlands to alpine summits. The Alps are one of the most biologically rich of all temperate areas on the planet. It provides habitat for over 20,000 species. The area covers 25% of the eastern US and holds more than 50% of its carbon stocks. Over 500,000 people in North America live within a day's drive of this region's protected areas. Direct pressures from human activity include urban encroachment, of course, energy development, pollution, industrial forestry, and extensive fragmentation from dams and roads. That's why much, but certainly not all, of TNC's work here in Massachusetts involves the Alps region. This slide illustrates a number of initiatives of the Nature Conservancy underway here in Massachusetts, where land protection is a key strategy. And I'd like to briefly go over them for you. The irregular shaped kind of khaki colored area out west represents the Berkshire wildlife linkage, an area that carries a lot of importance for resiliency and connectivity between the forests of the Green Mountains of Vermont and the Hudson Highlands in New York. The area has an estimated 75% forest cover and links the most intact forest ecosystem in southern New England. Within the linkage, the Nature Conservancy and its partners have been working for over 10 years, maintaining connected habitats and restoring connections between areas fragmented by roads and development. Our linkage partners have been using TNC's resilient and connected landscape concepts and data to inform their decisions and focus their efforts. The Nature Conservancy and the Mass Department of Transportation partnered with UMass Amherst to identify places where activities like land protection and changes to transportation infrastructure will provide the greatest benefit for wildlife connectivity. The Critical Linkages Project identifies road segments, road stream crossings, and key habitats to bridge gaps, sometimes tunnel through them, in the corridors we see in the landscape through the use of wildlife tracking information, the location of protected lands, site visits, and local knowledge. Protecting land at these key connectivity corridors across roads is a key strategy to allow species to move throughout the BWL and the Alps. The TNC owns or manages roughly 8,000 acres in western Massachusetts, from the northern Pioneer Valley to the mountains of the southern Berkshires. We have helped protect 14,500 acres in the region over the years and have transferred 6,500 acres to other conservation organizations to manage. These partnerships are key to having the broadest land protection impact. Collectively, between TNC, state agencies, land trusts, federal agencies, and municipalities, 40% of the Berkshire wildlife linkage has been legally protected to conserve habitats critical for all of us. This is tremendous progress, but there's more work to be done. As the network of protected lands remains incomplete and fragmented, we're working to ensure that the new land protection efforts in the region build out forest core areas and make connections between protected areas to ensure a continuous corridor for species to move and thrive. So, for example, TNC has been working in the Westfield River watershed, where it has its Colesbrook Preserve and where the intact forests and high-quality rivers and streams offer one of the last and best opportunities for large-scale forest and aquatic system conservation here in southern New England. TNC works with Berkshire Clean, Cold, and Connecticut Restoration Partnership, a network of key stakeholders in Berkshire County, working to keep the Housatonic and Farmington River watersheds healthy and thriving. TNC's largest preserve, the Chenab Brook Preserve, runs along the Housatonic River in Sheffield. TNC is also working with the Go Big Forest Legacy Initiative, where TNC has been providing technical support to the Kestrel Land Trust and other land trusts, which are conducting an extensive outreach effort directed to the larger private landowners in the area to aid them in understanding and acting on their options to protect the forested land in the region. The initial response of the landowners to a recent coordinated mailing has been very encouraging. And then another example is TNC is working in the America the Beautiful Challenge watersheds. The America the Beautiful Challenge Grant Program is a whole watershed restoration initiative led by the Massachusetts Division of Fisheries and Wildlife. We're partnering with Mass Wildlife on this $3.8 million America the Beautiful Challenge Grant. It's a public-private grant program for locally led ecosystem restoration projects that invest in watershed restoration, resilience, equitable access, workforce development, corridors and connectivity, and collaborative conservation. The project will improve habitat in corridors from the Berkshires to the Connecticut River Valley. It will enhance critical connections in 3 watersheds: the Williams River watershed in the Berkshires and the Fort and Mill River tributaries along the Connecticut River. And it will provide critical habitat for numerous imperiled species. Activities include, in this holistic watershed restoration, dam removal, as Barbara mentioned, failed bridge removal, culvert replacement, and invasive species management. Throughout other parts of Massachusetts, we're conserving land and working in watershed partnerships to help people to become more resilient to impacts from climate change and by using natural and nature-based solutions. For example, the Massachusetts and New Hampshire chapters of TNC are working with the Merrimack Conservation Partnership to update its conservation plan in an inclusive, community-centered, and equitable way. I see the time ticking by very quickly, so that's why I'm speeding up. The plan will focus on projects with multiple benefits to people and nature, and will be built on equitable, purposeful engagement to drive change across the watershed. In addition to the plan's traditional focus on land conservation in undeveloped forested areas of the watershed, the 2024 update will focus on urban and developed areas and identify opportunities to invest in water quality, climate resilience, and increased access to green spaces to improve quality of life along the Merrimack. We know that working in the Merrimack's major cities, especially Lowell, Lawrence, Manchester, and Nashua, is crucial to address the challenges that stormwater pollution and climate impacts pose to environmental justice, water quality, and public health in and around the river. Our goal is to develop this plan in a way which helps communities plan and acquire funding for projects which provide multiple benefits to community health and well-being. Along the Massachusetts coastline, TNC is charting and planning for salt marsh migration. Also, TNC is working on various nature-based approaches to protect the shoreline from wave action and to increase resilience like dune nourishment, bank stabilization, and marsh restoration. Well-considered land protection is, of course, another tool that's being deployed in that effort. In the Taunton watershed, TNC has had a long-standing commitment to climate adaptation and ecological restoration that comes with reconnecting waterways, working with partners on a watershed approach for conservation and multiple benefits. The Taunton watershed is home to one of the largest herring runs in New England and provides a diverse mosaic of wetland and upland habitats that support a wide range of species, including several that are globally imperiled. This freshwater ecosystem is also a vital public water supply, an important scenic recreational area, and of course, home for many people. Over 100 years ago, a Massachusetts state report declared the Mill River there dead. While alewife once spawned in this place in incredible numbers, manufacturing waste and dams made reestablishing the old fishery an impossibility, the report said. Well, after more than 15 years of work to remove the dams that obstructed the river, spawning alewife are back, and the larger Taunton River watershed system is remarkably vital. TNC is now working to accomplish similar results in the southeastern portion of the watershed. At the Nemasket River and the Assawamsett Pond Complex, or APC, because Assawamsett is a little hard for me to say, the APC is a series of 5 interconnected ponds, the largest of which drains to the Nemasket River, which then flows to the Taunton River, out to the Narragansett Bay. In recent years, excessive flooding has caused property damage and evacuations, road closures, losses of utilities, septic system failures, and economic losses. At other times, droughts have reduced water quantity, quality, and flow. And runoff from nearby development and impervious surfaces further degrades water quality. The compounded threats of climate change further exacerbate these issues. So TNC is providing financial and technical support for its community partners to develop a watershed management and climate action plan. That plan will include initiatives such as channel and wetland restoration in the upper Damascus River. It'll involve invasive water aquatic plant removal, Snake River culvert evaluation, a potential dam removal, and another dam upgrade, working with willing Long Pond landowners to implement nutrient reduction best management practices, and of course, again, land acquisition. So most recently, TNC initiated the Resilient and Connected Appalachians Grant Program. In an effort to support local land trusts and conservation partners like municipalities and tribal communities, the Nature Conservancy has launched this new grant program across the Northern the Northern Appalachian states. The Resilient and Connected Appalachians Grant Program is part of the larger Connectivity, Climate, and Communities Fund, which also includes the New York Climate Resilience Grant Program. In short, grants of up to $50,000 will be awarded to land trust municipalities and other partners for projects that result in the permanent protection of resilient and connected lands in pivotal landscapes. TNC is eager to support local groups which have developed the relationships and skill sets best able to build a network of landscapes in the Northern Apps region and to protect one of the world's most important regions, as I said. The first round of grant applications just closed in February 2024, and TNC is looking forward to expanding this program. So hopefully that gives you some sense of what TNC is involved with right now here in Massachusetts. And I will now pass it back to Barbara.
Thanks, Rich. It's great. And so we wanted to make sure we had some time for answering any questions. But also, we're really interested on your thoughts on, we really, collaboration and working on ways to get all our work done is kind of one of the things we really focus on. And so I'm really curious about what gets in the way of your ability to do land protection conservation work, the work you aspire to do, and what do you wish was different? If you could wave a magic wand, what would allow you to achieve your goals and our Massachusetts land conservation goals? So, so any questions you have on what we've been talking about, but also I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'm gonna stop the presentation, and so we can see each other. Great. Any questions? And you can put them in the chat, or you could raise your hand, or just come off mute. Hey, Rob.
Hi, I'll go ahead and ask one. I wondered, so, one of the things that kind of jumped out at me was I forget if, are we calling the Go Big Forest Legacy Project, the west of the Connecticut River. I'm not sure everybody, it might be beneficial for you to give just a tiny bit more background about that, but I'm kind of curious about TNC specific role in that, or what you see as your potential roles in that. I think you mentioned technical assistance, but I'm kind of wondering how you envision the funding for that project to come together. For example, if in fact the outreach does get a positive response and a number of landowners come forward, how are we going to kind of get to scale in your mind, and what role can TNC play in that?
Sure, great question. So as you know, Kestrel Land Trust is the lead partner on that project, which is just so amazing that they are, really stepping up and bearing a lot of the weight to bring all the partners together. And it's a large group of different partners in that region, and also our state and federal partners. And it's really focused around the Forest Legacy Program. There's a tremendous amount of money available through that program right now. that does focus on certain types of parcels, large forested parcels that are somewhat adjacent to existing conservation lands. So the Nature Conservancy, we provided GIS technical support to identify, what qualifies, right? Which of these parcels are large enough and have biomap, have forested landscape, and so on. So that was kind of a little bit of a complex GIS puzzle to make sure we had that all together for a good mailing list. And then they've, so the forest legacy will be a big piece of it. Kestrel's done some fundraising. We will also look at other funding sources. Not everybody we reach is going to be interested in the forest legacy program. It won't be a match for every landowner. So we'll look at other state funding and other state and federal, conservation lands funding to match. And then TNC, will help wherever there's gaps. They do have a plan in place to help and some funds raised to have additional capacity to handle some of those due diligence needs and spread those out through contractors. So to support the land trusts that are involved. So it's going to be a mix of using different resources to meet those needs, and as we see what those needs are. And
great, thank you.
There's a question in the chat from Julie. She says, I'm learning about so many different layers of programs. Is there any central list of resources that brings together local, state, federal, trusts, TNC, etc.? Understanding the whole landscape is difficult. I gather she meant funding, but I'm not quite sure.
Good question. Yeah, I know everyone has their website. I know the Land Trust Coalition has a good website for a lot of where you can learn about some of these funding sources. Rob, I don't know if you maybe can put that in the chat, and I think some of our other partners do as well.
One thing I will put in the chat at the moment. I think there might be a couple layers to Julie's question, and she's welcome to come off mute if she'd like. But one thing I hear her perhaps asking are, who are all the players? Not just the money, but who are all the players? Because it is a pretty complex landscape. One little tool that we have on our website is called Find a Land Trust. And it's a town by town filtering tool to figure out who's working in which region. I'll just say that one of the things you're going to want to do if you use it is to filter your search results. And then there's an expansion button where you can, I guess I'd use the map view. If you search by a town, use this little thing that expands the view so that you can see conservation partners that are also working in that region. So the primary results come up with land trusts, but then if you expand the list, you'll see many of the other conservation partners working in that specific town, including, the state agencies that are players there, and some of the other nonprofits that are not exactly land trusts, but are active in the conservation field collaboratively. For example, Appalachian Mountain Club would come up significantly in that western part of the state as very involved in conservation collaboratively. So that's one tool. Another tool that comes to mind, I'll search for it and post it in. One thing, if you're sort of just kind of relatively newer to the field and trying to get a lay of the land, Mass Woods, Paul Catanzaro's website, has a really nice open space handbook, which I think is kind of a great tool to just sort of begin to get a lay of the land. Has among elements of that is a really nice summary of funding. So I'll post a link to that as well in the chat.
I guess while you're posting that, one of the things that I think of when I look at this is, yes, it's frustrating that there's such a diverse amount of resources available to do this work, but that's also an encouraging thing, because there are all different ways to try to put a deal together. And work with the partners that you have or that you're aware of to try to find a way to make a particular project work. So there's not just one way to get a project done. There are many, many ways to try to get a project done. And it's just a little frustrating that you don't know the answer right off the bat until you start working on it.
Yeah, it's true. To Julie and others, one of the things that I think comes through in the open space handbook that I just posted in the chat is also the really significant role of municipalities. So in Massachusetts, the cities and towns are often very significant players in this conservation world. And so many projects are done collaboratively, but with the town involved and some state money involved and maybe some federal money involved, multiple nonprofits involved. So there's just so much going on that's at a collaborative level.
Yeah, Rob.
Barbara, you mentioned some of the RCPs and different regional collaboratives that TNC is engaged in, and maybe it's worth saying a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I think Rob has a really good point there that, in order to do this ambitious conservation work that we're all striving for in different ways, whether it's locally or regionally or, globally, we can't get there without collaborating, really, what we're calling radical collaboration. And a lot of these funding sources and projects, they're complex, and they require lots of different skills and funding. And they often require match. And so tapping into whether it's funds for municipalities, bringing in your town partners, bringing in regional partners, all of those things can add up to some really pretty tremendous projects by bringing in people with different types of expertise and different access to different types of grants and funding. There's also the regional planning or organizations in your area that they help the municipalities with their MVP or the municipal vulnerability preparedness program. They help them with their transportation systems, land use planning, and they're a great resource to get to know. They help write grants for your municipalities to access some of these federal and state funds. There are watershed groups in some parts of the state. Again, those are really robust collaboratives as well, who bring in multiple partners and help convene multiple partners. So I think, I just encourage people to reach out to as many people as possible and bring in, if you're working on a project, bring in as many partners as possible, because you'll just be surprised at the amount of success you can have when you bring in those different ways of thinking and people have different pieces of information. No one person can know all the possible pieces to the puzzle.
There's a couple questions in the chat. One is asking about how the first round of resilient grants went. Did you consider it successful? How many applicants did you get? And how much money do you anticipate coming to Massachusetts? And Elizabeth Reblika might be asking about that grant program, which she says, when will the next grant round be?
Sure. Yeah, so this round, this is the first round and it just closed. So we are in the middle of reviewing applications right now. So I would anticipate the next round to be at the beginning of 2025. These were due at the end of February. So I imagine, the notice will go out late fall that's 2024, and then be due probably similar time frame, end of February 2025. I don't know all the numbers. We're in the middle of the review process, so there's not a lot to share yet. But I think in the next month or so, we should be making announcements. But it was successful. We got applicants from all of the states, and including Massachusetts. And they're great projects. Pretty excited. I'd be surprised if there aren't some that land in Massachusetts, since we've gotten applications from all of our states. So yeah, it's pretty exciting to be able to support, and again, these bits of money can really add up and help with the match. This grant program is pretty special because it doesn't limit how you use the money. A lot of programs are very limiting, but this could be used for stewardship costs and due diligence and staff time and, you know, whatever you need to make the project happen. And we did that intentionally because we know there's a lot of barriers to getting projects done because funding sources can be restrictive. So.
Other questions that anybody has? Just looking at the chat. Don't see any new questions there.
Is there a way we can check and see if anyone is still awake?
When they're off camera, you just never know.
Well, we really appreciate, we appreciate the opportunity to talk with everyone and share a little bit. We're looking forward to Saturday. Hopefully a lot of you are coming to the conference on Saturday. We'll be there. Rich is hosting our table. There'll be bunch of other staff there as well. And yeah.
Great. Yeah, it should be a great gathering. Since there's a little break in the action, can I I'm very interested in your work in the Taunton River watershed, and when I worked at the Nature Conservancy, I did some work there. So I'm curious. I noticed that you had a couple of triangles there on the Nemasket River. So are you actually thinking you can remove a couple dams on the Nemasket River, or are those just being studied, or is it like, I don't know the status of those projects?
Good question, Rob. And Maria, if you may know Maria Gabrielle.
Yes, yeah, sure.
She's our project lead in that area. And I don't think I can answer. There are some culvert replacements. There is, I believe, a dam that's being studied. I don't have all the very specifics on it. But I'll have maybe Maria.
Yeah, no, I can reach out to her. That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And but we're working with some partners there, and there's a lot of different components that are sort of in various stages of investigation and parts of the process.
It was so exciting to see the High Street Dam removal project finally happen, because that, in Bridgewater was a project under discussion for years and years and years. So exciting to see that finally happen. Very cool.
Oh, I see, Julie, you're asking about carbon sequestration, and that is also one of our focuses at the Nature Conservancy and in Massachusetts. Our climate scientist, Laura Marks, who many of you are probably familiar with, is really focused on that work. And there's a lot of overlap with our rivers and lands work and land protection work. Obviously, Massachusetts is such a highly forested state. Maintaining it as forest is really key to hold that carbon in place. We have I think last year, Laura did a presentation on our family forest carbon program, and that program is continuing to grow. We hired another outreach professional to reach out to landowners throughout the state, actually a 3-state area, and talk with them about the program, but also other conservation actions that they could take or might be interested in, and including, if they have express interest in land protection, we can connect them to land trusts and other entities. So those multiple benefits, I think I quickly mentioned, when we're doing our work, is, trying to get as many benefits, whether it's flood risk reduction, great habitat for biodiversity, sequestering carbon, trying to get projects that give us as many of those bangs for our buck as possible.
There is a, workshop or two at the conference that very much will delve into that. And a couple of the workshops at the conference will be videotaped, and eventually those videotapes will find their way into our new video library. So I encourage you to check out the new version of the massland.org website that's going to launch in a couple of weeks, including a video library. forest carbon is a focus of many of the partners that we work with, and I know that they'll be presenting on that at the conference. Great. Well, let's just see one last chance for any questions before we bid you adieu on a Wednesday evening. Seeing none, we'll thank you very much to Rich and to Barbara for sharing this great information and the snazzy videos. It was great to have you with us. And we've got this recorded, so it'll benefit others who couldn't make it tonight. Thanks very much and have a great evening.